I'm going
All right, welcome to our weekly, or trying to be weekly, New York Giants Preservation Society meeting. Tonight we have a very special guest, Mo Resner, who'll be assisted by a former Zoom guest speaker, George Greger. Just to tie up some loose ends, if some of you have not heard, Perry Barber was inducted into the New York State Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Perry. Well deserved. And you said 40 years. That sounds like you're talking about being a compiler, and we know you're not. So you be quiet and just accept your recognition that you deserve.
Me, be quiet.
There'll be no meeting next week due to Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to you all. And then the following week, we will have Corey Bush on. Corey was Bob Lurie's right-hand man in San Francisco when Lurie purchased the team from Horace Stoneham. Many lean years and some glorious years. And then he was also there when Bob Lurie sold the team to Peter McGowan, one of our members who passed away, a few years ago. Today we have Mo Resner. Mo and Perry and myself were some of the original members of this preservation society. Mo has spoken, live at our meetings, but a lot of you, couldn't make it to New York, and he's got a great story to tell about the last game at the Polo Grounds, which is this DVD called The End of an Era. Fabulous documentary of the last game. It is in the Hall of Fame. And Mo is a real Renaissance man. He was on AMC talking about Ginger Rogers. George helped him with a book called The Chicago Cubs and Me. Mo screws around saying he's a Giant fan. We know he really is a Cub fan, but we'll let him pass with that today. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mo Resner. Mo, floor is yours.
Well, I want to get back to the original situation. Going back because the video came out and many years later. But how did I become a Cub fan when I should be a Giant fan? And that's a book in itself, which George took care of.
well, let me just give an intro. Some of you may not know. I met Mo when he was still Morris, and I met him through the world of finance. And I realized he's a 160-year-old man because there are actually three Mo's. There's actually a Mo, a Morris, and a Mike. And these are the three faces of Mo. Entertainment, finance, and baseball. When I told him that I was writing baseball books and my next one would be on the Cubs, he said, "Oh, I'm a Cubs fan. Let me write the introduction." I said, "Okay." Well, his introduction over the next 2 years of emails back and forth turned out to be his life story and really comprises the first half of that book. And then the second half of the 100+ years of Cubs in verse. All my books are in verse except the last one. Now, I learned that Mo had a more interesting life than just finance. In fact, most of our dealings are not on business. They're on keeping the book going and continuing relationships of people that he knew. Sadly, we'd sit in the diner to find out that Lenny Marullo died just as we were talking about meeting him, or Nick Testa, whom we did meet a couple of times in Westchester, and then he passed away. Mo, by the way, Mo, the Giants were better to Mo long before the Cubs recognized his existence. He waited 70 years for a championship. Some of us waited 55 from 1954. But that story includes what Gary was saying, 1957. I'm going to let Mo explain what happened the last day the Giants played in the Polo Grounds. But that was recognized in San Francisco, and he spoke to a crowd about 23,000 more than is sitting here tonight So the Giants and Larry Bear and others did appreciate, made friends with many, many New York Giant people in the 50s because he was in the Giant organization in the minor leagues before he switched over to the Montreal Expos. So,
Well, the original guy, without him, I wouldn't even be sitting here now. Nick Testa, who you may have heard of, he was in one professional game for the San Francisco Giants. And Nick and his family and my family were neighbors
in the Bronx.
in the Bronx. So Nick was very, very instrumental in getting me started. And he took me out to Dallas, Texas in 1957. And he introduced me as a new coach. And in 1957, we were owned by I believe the Kansas City Royals. And then by 1960, we were owned by the by the New York Giants.
It was the New York Giants then,
New York Giants.
because you had Brolio and Testa, and you had a person who doesn't appear here is Willie McCovey, who started calling Mo Big Mo. And the reason McCovey's not in this picture is because in 1957 in Florida, he could not stay in the same hotel as the white players.
Yeah.
Right, Mo?
When I asked Willie to have some lunch, he said, "You don't know what's going on. I can't have lunch with you." And he explained it to me. And it was pretty aggravating. But we remained friends anyway for a long time. And it was good. It was really good to know him. But Nick Testa was the key. He never played for the New York Giants. He was in the minor leagues for about 15 years, AAA double, single, and I was with him all the way. Then he got promoted to the Giants, and I was right there with him. He was my closest friend.
He got into the game in the 8th inning and did not bat in the 9th because Darrell Spencer hit a home run. He was behind the on-deck hitter, and his only fielding play as a catcher was chasing a foul pop that he and Cepeda converged on, and it dropped, and they gave Nick an error.
Right. By the way, when I was 11 years old in the neighborhood, there was a friend of mine who was 3 years older, and he said, "I want to take you to the Polo Grounds. I want you to be a Cub fan." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Go with me to the Polo Grounds." And we did. And the Cubs beat the Giants. Lenny Marullo hit a home run, which I caught. And I was very excited. And I became a Cub fan. And then the Giants, everything with the Giants was secondary. Lenny, coincidentally, I met him 30 years later at the New York Baseball Writers Association dinner, and we became the best of friends till he passed away.
We were having lunch at a diner near Mo's home in Edison, and he got Ernie Brolio, another one of his buddies, on the phone in California. Ernie Brolio, like Testa, came up through the New York Giants, but made it to the majors with the Cardinals. And of course, his claim to fame was the trade for Lou Brock. But Brolio continued to be Mo's friend from the old days in the 50s. And Ernie also passed away shortly after we spoke with him on the phone.
Yeah, Ernie was...
Well, he had stories with Cincinnati.
He was the greatest. Greatest kid.
He got screwed by the Reds in a contract squabble that Mo knew about, but I don't think we put that in the book.
I don't know. I think it's been in the book. The real story about Ernie Brolio is that he did have a sore arm, and the Cubs sold him to Cincinnati, and they sent him to the AAA where he was 15-15. And I expected to meet him at Shea Stadium, and the Reds were coming to Shea, and they denied him the privilege. and he walked into their offices. How do you go 15 and 15 with a sore arm? And I want to go to the major leagues. I don't care if it's for one day. They said no. He took the contract, threw it away. He's still suspended by the Cincinnati Reds. So the real story is that he was still able to pitch after the sore arm. And that's what really, really annoyed him. I knew Ernie for over 50 years, as well as his close friend Joe Amalfitano, who was with the New York Giants and San
I
Francisco
saw him
Giants.
get his first hit. He was a bonus baby.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, Joe might be listening into the program tonight, but he's not the type of guy that likes to get around too much. So he's probably not on. I tried desperately to get a hold of Billy Gardner, who everybody knows. He's going to be 95 in July. He couldn't talk to me. So I spoke to his wife, Barbara, and we discussed the family. Billy had one member of the family also named Billy Gardner, who was a 23-year-old manager for the New York Mets farm team. He might be listening in. So I tried to tie in as much of the Giants with Cubs. So if not for my dumb friend in New York, I would have been probably New York Giant fan because of Nick Testa.
Well, some of the names who played for the Giants, about whom Mo especially close, and they're listed in our book, are Philippe Lou, with whom he coached in the Montreal Expos minor league system, and we're going to talk about Fanning because he's important. Amalfitano, Larry Baer, Orlando Cepeda, Danny Gardella, Billy Gardner, Ray Jablonski, Eddie Logan, Willie Mays, William McCovey, Peter McGowan, Mark Melanson. We met him at the Polo Grounds dedication that one time, and I still root for him because he's nice to us. He was a gentleman, and he was the only Giant who cared about the legacy and the history of the New York Giants. So I root for him to do well. Gary Mintz, of course, Salty Parker, Dusty Rhodes, Steve Rothschild, Stacy Slaughter, Lenny Stan, Jaime Stoneham, Don Torsick, Nick Testa, and Dom Zanni, another Cincinnati
Oh,
Giant.
that's interesting. Dom Zanni played for the San Francisco Giants for a while, and Nick Testa played in one game, but they were buddies. And the coincidence of this is when I was about 18 and 19, I had a team and I called it the Mel Green Cubs. There was an amateur team in the Bronx. There was a period of time when Nick Testa and Dom Zanni played for me just prior going to the major leagues. I'm proud of that.
Mo, why don't you tell us about the video?
Yeah.
September 1957. One of my brothers was actually at the game. I wasn't.
I was.
No one was.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you how it started. I had nothing to do one day, and nobody wanted to go to the Polo Grounds. And it was not the Cubs, it was Pittsburgh. So I decided, the heck with it. I'm going to take my movie camera with me, and I'm going to go to the game. I didn't realize it was the last game of the season, and I certainly didn't realize it was the last game ever for the New York Giants. I went to the ballpark. I paid a couple of dollars, and I knew the security guard on the third base side. So he says, "What are you doing with the camera?" I said, "I'm taking some movies." He says, "You better jump inside because there's ceremonies going on." I said, "For what?" "It's the last day in their history. Where have you been?" He says, "Climb in." I climbed onto the field, and I was there for 3 hours. And I took pictures of the ceremonies. And Perry Barber helped with the musical aspect of it. What's the matter with me?
50 years after the date, somebody, including Mo's son, talked him out of dragging the video out of the attic, and with a lot of help from Perry, who actually composed and sings a song on the DVD. So Perry's in a Hall of Fame by virtue of at least that. And that DVD is, you know, some of it you can get online, but
Yeah. Ed Randall introduced the movie, and we had the music, and we did a lot of things with it.
and clips from the video, including Mays, Jablonski, Hank Sauer, Rigney.
So Mo, for the people who have not seen the video, what exactly did you tape?
I took pictures of most of the ceremonies.
Who was
And-
involved in the ceremonies?
Hubble and Marquardt.
Yeah, well, it included a Carl Hubble and Rube Marquardt. I think it's the first movies ever made with the two of them in, because they pitched for the Giants as separate eras. But it was, again, it was the last day. I met Willie Mays and Bill Rigney and Hank Sauer. And they were so friendly, I could have grabbed a glove and had a workout with them.
Antonelli started the game.
Yeah, Antonelli started for the Giants and took some nice photographs, including Dusty Rhodes striking out. And he took the bat and he threw it in my direction. He's really angry. Now, very quickly, 30 years later, I talked my dear friend Dick Stewart into coming to the New York Giants, the New York baseball writers. And he brought Dusty Rhodes with him. So I met Dusty for the first time, and he didn't remember throwing the bat at me, but he remembered throwing the bat. So that was another great situation with
This is Marquardt and Hubble, Tinelli throwing the first pitch. This is excerpt from Mo
What about
video
Mrs.
in
Blanche
my-
McGraw and who's the other one? Hans Lobert, right?
took pictures of Mrs. McGraw. I met her.
Hans Lobert was there. Yeah.
Hans Lobert, who played in the 1910.
18 or something. He raced a racehorse around the
Yeah.
field once and lost.
And I also fielded by accident. I photographed Willie's last hit as a New York Giant.
There's Widow McGraw, right?
So
Yeah.
George, let me ask you a question. These pictures that are in your book are photographs that you took from the screen of the video, correct?
Exactly, and the Resner collection is credited with that. Yes, that's what I did. I just took it off the screen.
Oh.
The book, The Chicago Cubs and Mo, is over 400 pages. And
Oh,
it
it's-
includes a lot you already spoke about. But it also showed my show business career. I was a nightclub comedian, and I was forced to retire because I was too funny.
Well, he was Jackie's friend. This is one of his friends.
Jackie passed away in July.
This is Lauren McCall. right?
That's not Jackie. Yeah.
That wasn't McCall. This is another friend of his, very good friend.
Ginger.
Rogers.
Yeah.
Ginger
and,
Rogers.
She said Mo was a better dancer than the other guy, Astaire.
Oh, a better
So, Mo,
dancer.
Mo,
Uh-huh.
the
Better
original, Mo, the original tape, I think was like 17 minutes long. What made you go back? I mean, how long was it sitting in the basement or the attic? What made you take this film, you know, I guess colorize it more or fix it up, make it more visible, add Perry's vocals, add an introduction? Tell us what happened.
Well, I hardly remember it. I remember it was laying there for years.
I
Somebody saw it.
remember.
Somebody
You
saw
brought it. You brought it to a meeting at the church before we became the New York Giants Preservation Society. We used to meet up
Wow.
there. You brought it there and showed it to some of us, and we, as a group, convinced you to do something with it because we
Yeah.
said you can't just let it lie around for another 50 years. So that's when you started, you know, working and putting together a nice little
Yeah.
a presentation of it, of
And
the
Perry, I
footage.
just realized you took me to the Hall of Fame with the video.
Oh, right.
And Jeff Idelson, who was then president, he invited his whole crew into the screening room. And I showed the movie. It was about 40 minutes long. And I couldn't believe that I got a standing ovation from the Hall of Fame, which is exactly where that video is. Thanks to you, Perry. That was great.
That was a good song and a good performance, by the way. And Perry and my son have something in common. They both performed at CBGB's.
That dump? No, I never played there. I went there a couple of times, but
I
man, the
thought you said
bathrooms
that.
are awful. So
I know, well, it's not there anymore.
So,
By the way,
Mo, where does, you know, I know you originally made the video and then you had it fixed up even more. Where does Willie Mays come into this as far as,
Willie Mays is the only guy left on the entire team who was not only alive, but he remembered it, and he saw the video, and he sent me a long letter which I had to cut down, and he's now in the back of the book.
he's in the back of the video now praising
Yeah,
it, correct?
oh wow.
He said he cried.
And here you can see Mays is on the video now. Here he is.
Oh, I have to
Yeah,
order a
you-
new one. May I ask a question? Mo, Mo,
Yeah.
because the Giants were playing the Pittsburgh Pirates that day, I am intensely curious as to why there is no footage of Roberto Clemente in your video. I've
It's an
looked.
accident. It's an accident
Oh, okay.
that I didn't have him.
yeah, he was a star.
You just left him out. Didn't think to.
No, there was
Okay.
no intention. It's just,
I think
guess
one of
it's-
the best parts of the video is you filmed the video as a young person. How old were you, Mo? Mo, how old were
What was
you
that?
when you filmed it?
How old were you?
how long?
How old?
Oh, I was old even then.
Now, how old were you?
You were about 36.
I was about in my 30s.
He was 30s.
Yeah,
Uh,
when I did the video.
Speaking of age, and this is corrected in subsequent books, Mo Resner is the oldest person to sign his first professional major league player's contract. And this is it. Montreal,
Nice.
1978. But they didn't have the sense to use him out of the bullpen.
He was older than Satchel Paige when Paige signed
Yeah,
his
By
contract.
about 6 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I beat Satchel Paige by a few months, didn't I?
But he did throw at Wrigley Field. He did pitch in Wrigley Field once.
Nice.
And
My,
this is
my,
after-
my
after-
comment was that the film that you did as a young man was very much aided when you got back to it as an older person, because your narration of what is going on the field is superb. Introducing all of these dignitaries, all of the Giant players who were on the field, did a wonderful job. I really enjoyed that more than anything. You talking and explaining what you're seeing as an older person rather than the younger man who was videotaping it without sound.
And there's some great interviews at the end of that video.
Yeah.
Logan was in it, and Russ Hodges and others.
Oh, by the way, there is one other living member. Eddie Logan was the bat boy.
Yes.
And I spoke to him 50 years later when I sent him the video.
And where did you get I know after the video is done, you have audio of the clubhouse and they're speaking to Rigney about leaving to go to San Francisco. That was fabulous.
Yeah, that was created, that clip was actually created by a guy named Phil Grease, Gries, who I haven't seen in many years, who I'm meeting shortly. But without that interview would not be in there. Everything is in there except that. That is what I,
That video is not so much play action as it is the personalities on the field before the game.
well, I had Johnny Antonelli's first pitch.
Yeah.
A
there's somebody in
guy
there.
named Johnny Powers, who hit a home run, and I just happened to film it. And the Pittsburgh won the game 9-1.
And Antonelli lost opening game to Pittsburgh, and they scored 9 runs on opening day against the Giants.
Does anybody have any questions for Mo?
Yeah, is the video available for purchase somewhere?
Yeah,
When's the best place? I guess Gary.
well, I have a few.
Well,
You can, I tell you what, order it from me and you get a free copy of Did You Know? All the factoids you think you knew about, but you didn't. I'm not selling those because I don't want to deal with the IRS. Seriously, on the cover is a picture of the ball I got from Sandy Koufax a few months ago. By the way, Sandy Koufax bought the first copy of the Mo book.
Aw.
January 15, 2017, he waited. He was hoping to have it in time for Christmas, but we couldn't put it together because Mo's life story was too long. And I had to include his days with the Marines and other funny things that went on in his life.
yeah, I was lucky with the Marines. I survived.
We won the war because he left.
Right.
That's okay. But if anybody wants that, talk to me. Between Mo's son and me, don't bother Mo with that because he has limited storage capacity in his
Yeah,
truck.
and I will make one comment. When I sent out the Zoom, I took something off YouTube and it's really shitty. It's choppy. It's
Oh,
a
you
little
couldn't get it on-
snippet. It's a snippet from the video. The video is nothing like that. It is very, very clear
Nobody knows how
and
it got on.
concise.
Nobody knows how it got on, and my son, who's a computer expert, can't get it off.
Well, it's okay that it's on. I just don't want anybody under the impression that it's a crappy looking film because it is not. It is excellent. It is in terrific shape. And if whoever has it or buys it or whatever sees it, they will see that it is not choppy at all.
And I
Ed
took
Clear,
a-
you're up, Ed.
Yeah, just a comment. I mentioned this to Mo once before when he was kind enough to send me this movie. There's a little side story in here of Hollywood. Another tragic figure that appears in this movie from the grandstands is an actor called Jeff Chandler.
Oh, yeah.
I had just seen him in the movie Away All Boats, which was a terrific movie at the time, war-produced thing. And he's there in the stands waiting to watch the game, and Mo captures him on film. And the poor fella had a tragic operation just after that.
Yeah.
And where we lost him. And he was a young man too. So we lost Jeff Chandler, if anybody else knows who I'm talking about. It's a little
Oh,
sidelight.
yeah. He was handsome, man. He was handsome. Liked him.
And you can see him in the movie.
Yeah.
Now, this is Mo in Wrigley Field. He wasn't happy with the first pitch, so he said, I'm not getting off the mound. I'm gonna-"
Yeah, I refused to get off the mound, and I threw it a second time, and 30,000 people was screaming and yelling. The only other guy who ever threw 2 times at Wrigley Field was Ronald Reagan. Only other one.
And also, Mo coached Joe Madden a little bit, and Madden was so amazed by the wisdom he was getting from Mo that he quit the Cubs and fled to California.
Hey, by the way, the guy that created this whole thing for me to get to Wrigley Field, he was only a general manager at the time, Jed Hoyer.
Yeah.
And Jed is now president of the Cubs,
He's right there.
and he's a very, very good friend. He did everything for me.
Mo is the oldest person to bat in an organized baseball game, and he actually took batting practice with the Cubs earlier this year in Wrigley Field.
They invited me to Wrigley. I did it at AA, and I don't hit him far, but I'll hit him over third and over short. And I still do it. That's my hobby.
The team in Tennessee, the double team, the
Yeah.
Smokies, treat Mo like a king.
Yeah.
And I told him one day, you know, the AAA teams in Iowa, you need to go over there. Those guys did not treat Mo nicely.
Well, they didn't, they were a little, they said, we're different than the other teams. You just come out, throw out the first pitch, we'll introduce you, and that's it. But I never got around to going to Iowa, and I never got around to going to the single A. But I'm close to the Cubs, and I'm close to the Tennessee Smokies.
And the Giant connection includes a friendship with Larry Bear.
Yeah,
And we ran into him at Wrigley Field. The Giants.
well, that's the day I threw out the first pitch for the Cubs.
Yeah.
And I met Larry, and we became friends from that moment on. And by the way, the Cubs beat the Giants 5-0 that day.
We don't talk about that.
I wear two hats. I got one.
I know. And you got the orange. This is the old orange, but it's not the Giant New York Giant orange. This is actually a Met giveaway one day at Shea Stadium.
Now, I have a problem. When I root for the Cubs, and I mentioned this at a Giants breakfast, I said, I love to make a change to the Giants. A psychiatrist told me it's impossible to change. Once you're a Cub fan, you can't change anymore. And everybody laughed. That includes Willie Mays and Sabian and the rest of them. So I was honored to be invited to 3 breakfasts when they won the 3 World Series.
From Martin Rose, Steve.
So now when the Cubs win it, when the Cubs win a game, when they play the Giants, I like it, but I also cry because I'm beating a team who I also love. So you think it's easy being a Cub fan?
Anybody else have a question? Renee, go ahead. Renee?
Yeah, I got a 2-part question. One is while filming this that day on the field with the dignitaries, the players, the fans, I mean, I know what my mom told me, but I'm curious to hear your story about what the people on the field felt like, that being the last day. That is it, being in New York. I mean, if you could.
I got
if you could
pictures of
explain that. And then my other question, if you after you finish this.
Yeah, I got pictures of the spectators, but they didn't look sad. I don't know why.
Well, it was a fait accompli.
What's the other part of the question? Yeah, another question.
The second part.
The second part is being a Cubs fan. What was your reaction? I never heard this, so I'm curious to ask. When the Cubs finally won the World Series, your feelings about that? I'm sure you must have been ecstatic.
I cried.
I was alone in my house, and I cried. Then that year, I went to the New York Baseball Writers Association dinner, which is a black tie affair. I'm there for 50 years. Who was there? Another guy I know for many years, Terry Francona. And he hugged me and said, don't feel sorry. You did great.
Thank you.
That's what kind of a guy Terry is, by the way. He's
All
a
right,
wonderful-
Mars, go ahead, Mars.
Well, this is perhaps a continuation of Renee's question. Did anybody cry like Mrs. John McGraw? And any other old-time Giants cry on that last day at the ceremony?
Maybe, but I didn't see it.
And just a comment, during the years that the two last years in New York, when the Giants only drew about 600,000 people, the Cubs only drew about 500,000 in Wrigley Field, but there was never any talk of the Cubs leaving Chicago. What do you think about that?
They sold more bubble gum in Manhattan than
Well,
they did in
Yeah,
Chicago.
they're making a joke out of it. They're making a joke out of it, but I believe they own the field. They own the team, and the Cubs were such a fixture in Chicago, like they still are. But the Giants were definitely losing money at the Polo Grounds, as the Dodgers were in Ebbets Field.
Parking was a problem.
But if you were ever able to look at the books of the New York Giants, they were losing unbelievably. They had to get out.
Yeah, well, the Cubs were terrible in the 50s. Matter of fact, they were terrible through, until, I mean, in the early part of the century, they were successful. But in the 50s, they were terrible, and they only drew 500,000 a year for several consecutive years. And the White Sox weren't drawing very well either. So why was there, why was there any talk about them leaving?
Every organization is different. Everyone has his different
It's
situations.
ownership too.
Yeah, the ownership, of course. But it was a surprising move to a lot of people. A lot of people never got over it. Leaving
I
the
never
club.
did.
Neither did I.
Remember that?
How do you like that? I got 3 people so far who are against the move.
Well, my mom, that's,
You could add me to that.
my mom was, yeah.
How could you be for the move?
Yeah,
Mo,
because-
I was at the last Giant Dodger game on my 10th birthday when Hank Sauer hit a 2-run homer after Mays and Jablonski hit consecutive triples. And that was in the 4th inning. And the Giants lead held up and they won the game 3-2. Kirk Barkley bested Don Drysdale. And so the last Giant Dodger game on my 10th birthday, I was there. I wanted to go to the last game against Pittsburgh, but my pop wasn't interested because he said they were leaving anyway.
Well, a lot of people still ask that question.
Yeah.
Why the hell didn't you show up that day?
The answer, what for? What good is it gonna do?
No, it does a lot of
Yeah,
good.
Well,
Harvey,
Well, the
you're
decision was
up,
already made.
Harvey. Harvey, go
Mo.
ahead.
Mo, I got a quick story. Around the spring of 1960, I was in the 10th grade at James Monroe High School in the Bronx. And I had this silly idea I was going to go out for the baseball team. And I did. And we had an indoor batting cage where nobody hit. But into the gym walks Dom Zanni. And he's carrying a San Francisco Giants duffel bag. And the coach says to me, Weinberg, get in the batting cage, grab a bat, but don't swing. It wouldn't have mattered because I was good field, no hit, really no hit. But I remember vividly standing in that batting cage while Zanni threw pitches. Now, I'm sure he wasn't throwing 100 miles an hour, but to me it was. And I could still remember the buzz of at one point he threw a curveball, and I almost, if there was a foxhole, I would have jumped in. But the coach, I wonder if you knew the coach. I didn't realize you had a team in the Bronx. The Monroe coach was Joe Consagra.
Not sure if I know the name.
well, I
Okay.
remember saying.
I do, Harvey, I do.
I know Renee does. Thank God there's 2 Monroe. And last comment, the big name that graduated in our class when we eventually graduated in '62 was Ed Kranepool.
Rainpool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've umpired up there.
Tell you about James Monroe High School,
You did.
which I call the Cub, of course. We went to Monroe to play a game, and it was a big game, and I was pitching. I was primarily a pitcher at the time, and I had a 3-1 count on one guy, and they called time, and my manager came out and said, don't throw this guy anything but a fastball. It wasn't fast enough. That ball, I could still see going over the right field fence at James Monroe High School. That
It was a
my
short
memory.
field in right field.
Yeah, but he hit it far, far away. I walked off the field right after he swung. The game was over and we lost.
One of the pictures from the video, or in the video, was Bobby Thompson pointing to the left field stands.
Hmm.
And the plaque is in Watchung, New Jersey, where Thompson lived out his life at a country club. And there's a plaque honoring Bobby Thompson. And by the way, there's also Mark Mellinson at the Polo Grounds a couple of years ago. The dedication of the stairs, if some of you were there.
Mhm.
By the
I was
way,
there.
probably the nicest guy I ever met on the New York Giants was Hank Sauer. Beautiful person.
Right, he managed eventually.
Yeah.
Perry, if I could ask you, I know you're longtime friends with Mo. What was your initial reaction when you saw this, and what did you spur him to do, or if anything?
Well, I think Mo gives me way too much credit, frankly. I mean, it was his baby from start to finish. He just needed somebody to give him a little encouragement, and you gave him as much as I did. I mean, you were there when he showed it to everybody, and it was definitely a group effort.
I remember the New York Times was there. And
Right,
there was an
that's
article
right.
and Mo's picture showing the video.
Right. Who's the guy that wrote that story?
Sandomir, maybe?
Right, Richard
Richard Sandomir, I
Yeah.
gave him a lift home that night.
Right, and now he writes these wonderful obituaries. for-
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and so anyway, that was the start of it, and I don't know.
Mo wants to. Mo
Perry,
wants
we
to-
lost you. Perry,
Mo wants to say a few words about his show business life.
No, it's just acknowledge it because that was a third of my life. The rest of it was really baseball. When I was a nightclub comedian, and I met a lot of people through Jackie Mason. So whoever he knew, I knew. And I met them all at the theater, and I maintained two friends from show business after a while, not just meeting one night. Jose Ferrer became a good friend. And do you remember Dane Clark made about 75 movies?
Yes.
He played Abe Saperstein.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
in,
Yeah.
Mo, I don't know if I ever told you, but one of your best friends, Jackie Mason, his brother was my rabbi.
Is that right?
Yes, Gabriel Mazer.
Three brothers,
He was a character.
and I think Gabe,
Gabriel Mazer, that's his name.
and I think Gabe is still alive.
Yes.
Mo used to sell the Mason CDs and DVDs in the lobby.
Yeah.
And one day he and I went out to Pennsylvania, and Mason and his wife promised to bring us deli sandwiches from Philadelphia. Well, we got to the theater, and we set up in the front, and Mason and his driver went in through the rear. I never met him. We slipped in and sat in the back row, and watched Mason. We had to be close to the lobby, because that's where the merch table was set up. I laughed so hard I was crying. Mo is sitting next to me, and he's not breaking a smile. He's listening to Mason's act, and he's picking up all the errors the guy's making in the jokes.
Well,
And
We were very close friends for over 40 years.
one time his wife called and said, Mo, we're running late. You got to go on and do 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. He and I were roommates for a couple of years in a 2-bedroom apartment on Park Avenue. So that's how close we were.
Mo performed in the movies, he performed on Broadway, and he performed at Carnegie Hall, but that's a story for another time.
Carnegie Hall.
Anybody
many
else
people-
have any questions for Mo? Hidden, go ahead, Hind.
My brother and sister-in-law were at the last game at the Polo Grounds, and they said that everyone ran on the field and took pieces of, they took things. And
Yeah,
is that true?
Yes.
They did. They warned me, take your hat. That's the first thing they're gonna go after. And I
That's
escaped.
when the Eddie Grant plaque got stolen in that
Yeah,
melee after the game. Somebody ripped it off of the monument out in center field and it vanished and has never been seen since.
Mo has one item on his bucket list you all should know about. Jack McKeon, an old friend, also in his 90s, wants to be the first manager to manage a major league game for one day in the majors.
no, I tell you what it was. He wanted to be, yeah, I think you're right.
And Mo said, if you do that, I want to be your coach.
And there's never been a coach as old as me. But it never worked out.
Either the Marlins or,
Yeah, he had a handshake agreement with Jeffrey Loria from the Marlins that when he turned one day older than Connie Mack, he would bring him back. And of course, he sold the team and Jeter kind of ran everybody out before he even officially took the reins. So I stake claim that Jack McKeon managed his last game for me at Parker's Field in Gloversville, New York, back in 2013 in a
Well,
vintage game.
Jeff Loria was not a friend of ours. And I still am close to Philippe Lou, who might be listening in. And I was with him at the Expos for the 7 years that I was there as a coach in the minor leagues. So I got to know a lot of people, from that era. A good giant and a wonderful person is Billy Gardner, who played for the New York Giants, and he couldn't come to the telephone. He's going to be 95 in July.
Oh,
And he's got a son by the same name who was a coach, a manager in the New York Mets organization when he was only 23.
Yeah, Gardner is the oldest living New York Giant.
Okay. And Joey Malfitano, who keeps to himself, knows about the show. And I don't know if he's listening in or not. Gary, did he ever call you?
I spoke to him.
Yeah, he didn't want to get
They're doing a Willie Mays documentary for HBO, so I try to get in touch with any of the 11 living New York Giants. And I'm actually working on getting the producer of that film to come speak about the progress of the film, and hopefully
You should be in it.
I should be in it.
Yeah, like a talking head thing.
That's very kind of you.
oh, by the way, I emailed Sean Stewart, the producer, to ask him if there's a date when it's going to premiere on HBO. And he said he couldn't give out that information.
Yeah, Mars, what I'm trying to do is to get him on to give us the progress of what's going on and why they're doing it.
Uh-huh.
So that's one of my goals.
Oh, good.
I
Good.
got, I have his phone number. It was on my calendar to call him, between now and Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So,
and Gary.
Oh, good.
yes, George.
Gary,
And George, I
Yeah.
want to tell you one thing. George
ahead.
lives in New Jersey and he drove all the way to assist Mo tonight. So, George, thank you so much.
Well, that's what we do.
Well, not many people do that. So,
Well,
what's
I drove.
your question?
I drove north of Pittsburgh to see Joe Marganeri. And when I got there, I was 2 minutes from his home when I called his home unannounced, and he didn't want to let me in. And his daughter got on the phone, and I explained, wait a minute. I saw Joe hit his only home run at the Polo Grounds. It went about 250 feet to right field and clipped the overhang. So then they said, oh, come on over. So I had my New York Giant caps, and I got a photo with Joe. He's still alive, 92 in January.
Wow.
Had a cup of coffee in 56 and 57. He and Dick Littlefield and a couple of other guys. But we remember those guys. But
Yeah.
Don Torsig, another friend of Joe's.
Don-
All right, we
Don
got,
Torsig.
I'm sorry, sir, I don't know your name. All it says is Zoom user.
My name is Marty, and I have a question for Mo.
Marty, go
Mo,
ahead.
the Brooklyn Dodgers, which I always was a fan because I come from Brooklyn. Did you know any of them? Did you ever speak to them? Duke Snyder, Roy Campanella, P.V. Reese? Any of those names were friends of yours?
Don't recall any of them being a friend of mine.
You'd
Okay, I
recall if they were.
I went to Ebbets Field and I sat in the center field stands and I enjoyed myself. It was a great field, but I was still a Cub fan. And but those were great days.
Well, the Cubs didn't do to the Dodgers what the Cardinals did.
I remember one time I was sitting at the Ebbets Field and Andy Pafko hit a line drive that was foul, and I was screaming and yelling. And I said, the next pitch is going over. And sure enough, the next pitch he hit for a home run. And I went screaming and yelling. And one guy got up and said, shut your mouth, I'll kill you. A guy much bigger than him got up and said, Mo, say whatever you want. He's not gonna hurt you. I never forgot that. The closest I ever came is that my uncle was a Chevy distributor in Brooklyn, and Joe Hatton and a couple others were his customers. That's the closest I ever got to knowing anybody, except the Giants and the Cubs. That's all I knew. Do you remember Danny Gardella?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I do.
I know the name.
He was the subject of a very famous lawsuit,
Yeah,
antitrust
you might
lawsuit.
say it's your top before your time. So was Abe Lincoln, but you knew him, right?
I read about him.
Yeah, Danny Gardella was a member of the New York Giants. He skipped to the Mexican League, and they suspended him from Major League Baseball, reinstated him. I mention him because when he was through playing, he used to work out in Bronx Park, and I was there. And he coached me. He said, you can run like a deer, don't worry about your hitting. And so I was a friend of another Giant. So I'm proud of all. This is all in the book, by the way.
Any final thoughts or any final questions before we wrap it up?
Thank you, Gary, for
Mr. Glazer, go ahead. Richard, go ahead. You got to turn your mic on, Richard.
where is Richard? That's Richard. Got it?
You got
There
on
you go.
mute.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Richard.
no, try it again. You got on mute.
There you
Am I
Now
go.
you're good.
You're good.
All right. I just want to thank everybody for inviting me to be on. I was introduced to Gary through Steve Rothschild, and that came about because I got together with Josh Prager last Saturday for about an hour and a half here in Pennsylvania, which was a very exciting moment for me. But among other things that I do, I'm a baseball umpire, and therefore I wanted to congratulate Perry on her induction into the Hall of Fame.
Hey, thank you in return. Let's work a game together sometime.
Are you still working?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Where do you work? You do baseball, right?
Baseball, strictly baseball.
You do
And-
the play down bases?
Yes, I do a regular rotation.
Where,
I just,
where do you
I-
work?
I work anywhere where there's a ball game. I do high school, college, adult men's, international baseball. I'm going to be doing the Cape Cod League next summer. So I'm kind of all over the place.
Perry did the
Where do you live?
All-Star.
I'm in New York City right now, but I'm a snowbird. I also live in Florida.
Okay. Well, I live down in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Philly. So most of the games I'm doing are in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and in New Jersey. So I mean, I would love to be able to work with you. I'll get my contact information to Gary, and if you ever need a good base guy, I was in 2017. I was a selected umpire of the year.
Wow. All right. Well, it's an honor. Thank you.
So,
So I just wanted to show these pictures of when Mo was honored in San Francisco, or when we all went out there. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, I'd like to get a copy of it.
Uh-huh.
We could put it in the next book. We could put it in the 6th edition, Terry.
Yeah, that was a wonderful afternoon, and the Giants were just great to all of us. So.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough that day when we left the field and Mo was with me. We went into Mike Murphy's clubhouse, and sitting at his desk was Willie Mays, which was one of the highlights of our lives.
Yeah, well, all of these wonderful things are largely due to your leadership, Gary. And
That's very kind.
Oh, no, seriously, you have done such amazing things with this group, not just keeping it together during a pandemic, but expanding it and getting such great people to come and talk to us. And I just can't.
Well, your umpiring, so everybody knows, your umpiring got you, me, and Mo fired from the other place. Because I insisted that everybody know you were umpiring a minor league, not a minor league, a spring training New York Met game. And I wanted everybody to know about it. And I was rebuffed. And from that moment on, you, Mo, and I were persona non grata. And
not only were you rebuffed, but you were rebuffed while you were drinking tepid coffee and eating greasy pizza.
There you go.
So, adding insult to injury. So.
But, who did you call out on strikes on the Mets?
David Wright.
Yes, that's the picture I remembered.
Yeah.
You were behind the plate with David Wright.
Yeah. And the next day he came up to bat and I said, David, are you mad at me for calling you out on strikes yesterday? And he looked at me and he said, oh no, that was a great pitch. You had to call me out. And then he swung at the next pitch and he knocked it 500 feet over the left field wall. I never felt such an impact going through my body. He hit that ball so hard, but it was funny. I had just joshed with him about calling him out on strikes the day before, and then he like slams one 500 feet. So, and yeah, somebody happened to get a picture of that split second after he connected with that pitch. It was a pretty amazing shot.
I heard he was one of the Mets that complained that it was too hard to hit a home run in Citi Field.
Yeah.
And that's when they started to bring in the dimensions.
That's true, Mars.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. So wrapping it up, if anybody's interested in this DVD or the book on the Mo and the Cubs, you could either contact me or contact George. But Mo, can't thank you enough. George, thank you again for your able assistance to make this possible tonight. Guys, stay healthy, okay?
That was great.
That was everybody.
Great.
Be well.
Thanks, Mo. Thank you.
We will see everybody in 2 weeks. I'll be in here to close out if need be, but have a good night, guys.
Good night, Daddy. Love you, Daddy.
Thanksgiving. Thanks. Thanks,